I have to say, my overall mental state and well being has improved drastically since about, I think it was March or April of 2022 when things finally started to feel like they were getting back to normal after COVID. COVID was a very hard time for me. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff going on aside from the lockdowns and the shutdowns because during that time my father was sick and dying of cancer, and he died in July of 2021. The 3 year anniversary of his death is actually coming up really soon, and I've been thinking about him a lot lately. So, there's a lot of other stuff aside from the actual COVID itself. Graduating into the COVID economy and struggling to find work and all that kind of stuff. Like it was just a really challenging time of my life. I think it was challenging for most people though. Like I am someone that probably is a little bit more introverted than extroverted. I don't want to like say I'm completely introverted because I think it's the whole introverted extroverted thing is definitely a spectrum. There are people who are definitely totally in one way or the other, but there are a lot of people that are kind of somewhere in the middle. And I would say I'm like, you know, introverted and extroverted. I'm like maybe not half, but I'd say like 65% introverted and 35% extroverted. So for a lot of people who are less social and don't really like do a whole lot of stuff anyway, like as far as like going out and traveling and all that kind of shit, COVID for a lot of people felt, kind of relaxing because you suddenly felt like a normal person because everybody wasn't doing anything, because nobody could travel. There was all these restrictions put in place. You had to wear a mask all the time and you couldn't really do stuff, and any gatherings were always limited to a very small number of people. Yeah, looking back though, I'm definitely glad that all that shit is gone because at first like it kind of felt kind of, I'm not going to say fun, but just kind of very interesting and fascinating because I never thought anything like this would ever happen in my life. I remember it was the last semester of my college. So it was about March. Yeah, it was March. I don't know the exact date, but it was like the second week of March that all the lockdowns and everything started coming into place. And I remember like the week before it happened, my college professor was talking about the schools shutting down and going all online because of COVID. Coronavirus was something that people were talking about, quite a lot at that point. But it wasn't something that people were really afraid of and thought that it was gonna like be something that would change people's lives forever. It was just like, okay, another virus. Like I remember being a kid hearing about the swine flu and all these different illnesses, Ebola, Zika, etc., etc. So I didn't think that, like, I was laughing at that notion that, oh yeah, school's gonna be shut down. Sure it is, sure it is. But it actually did, and I was just like, I was shocked, and I was like, I can't believe this is actually happening. This is something 20 years from now that we're gonna be telling like young people coming up like what it was like, like they ask what was it like during 9/11, where were you on 9/11. People are going to ask 20 years from now, where were you and what were you doing during COVID. I had such high aspirations. Oh, I'm going to use this time. I have all the time in the world now to do all this stuff. I'm going to learn a new language. I'm going to, just do all these things now that I have unlimited time. And a lot of it never really materialized. I didn't really do much. Like, I played some video games. Warzone just came out, so I was playing that for a little bit. Playing a lot of single player games and just hanging out with my family, spending time with them because we were all locked at home. None of us could do anything. Um, and that aspect, like I ended up being very grateful for that because the next year my father passed away, so being able to spend as much time with him as possible ended up being very beneficial to me in the long run. So I ended up having very little regret, because I spent a lot of time with my dad. And I think we binged watched The Sopranos, we binge watched Boardwalk Empire because he was like someone who he was really into like the mob type stuff. So yeah, we were streaming a lot of shows and watching a lot of shit and just enjoying each other's company. Um, and of course, the 2020 election happened, and that was a complete shit show and just a horrible thing. And it was around that time where my dad got his cancer diagnosis, so it was just rough overall, and me just being lost. I took during that summer, I finally did get a job working for the Census Bureau of all things, and that might be a different story for a different video, just talking about what that was like. It was not fun. It was not a very good job. And then I signed up like to get a job doing contact tracing because that was another huge thing, like calling people and trying to find out where they got COVID from and calling all these different people. I almost got the job. I got hired and they ghosted me after that. It was like New York State contact tracing. So I got hired and then I got ghosted. So that was fun because that was actually paying good. It was paying like $20 an hour. I made $20 an hour working for the census too, plus mileage. But I had to go around in a mask. The mask I fucking hated. I hated the mask so much. I remember just, like, especially in the summer, I'm like, oh, I can't fucking breathe in this thing. I hate it so much. That was definitely the worst thing. Not seeing, like, just people's faces, just seeing the masks all the time. And when I eventually got hired at my current job, I got hired around October of 2021. This was after my father died, because I really couldn't hold down a full-time job for a while because I was essentially taking care of my dad full-time. But the insurance wouldn't cover rides to the hospital. The hospital was an hour drive away. So it's like, what are you going to do? He had to make frequent, chemotherapy and stuff like that. So I had to, take care of family first and foremost. And that was my main focus for like a good 6-month period. Then I got one job, actually, before that, before my current job. I lasted there for like 2 weeks. There was a whole thing that went on with that. But the current job I have now, when I got hired and when I had my orientation and everything, I had to wear a mask. Coming into the building, you had to be like, you had to get your temperature taken and all that kind of stuff. And I was just like, I hate this. I really do hate this. And then, so I mentioned in the first video on my channel that I'm going to be open and honest with people, and sometimes that is going to make people not like me or dislike me and think a certain way. This is going to be one of those cases. So I'm going to talk about the vaccine. I decided not to take the COVID vaccine because I was afraid, because I was just like, this thing is like, it's just coming out so fast. I'm not sure if I can necessarily trust that this thing is completely 100% safe and there is no repercussions to taking it. And there's like, because think about COVID, like, right, it has mostly killed older people. It is something that has been deadly for people who are like, 50 and older. Not that it hasn't killed people my age too, but it is something that has mostly affected people at a much older age than I am. So I'm like, I'm not really someone that's at risk of dying from COVID anyway. I think the official CDC numbers was something like if you're healthy and if you're 22, you have like a 0.1% chance of dying, which, there are things that I do every day, like getting behind the wheel, where I'm much more likely to get killed than, the actual COVID. So I'm like, this doesn't really seem like something that I need. And the risks, in my view, far outweighed the potential benefits. And, I was still kind of like up in the fence about it. I was like, it's something maybe I'll change my mind about. And I'll be like, maybe this actually is a good thing for me. But when they started with the whole mandate thing, that is what really turned me away and kind of made me double down as far as like, yeah, fuck you, I'm not taking this shit. As far as like, yeah, you can't go to these places, you need a vaccine pass in order to get to like a restaurant or a bar or any public gathering. And then they also tried to say, yeah, like, I remember he had this executive order in place where if you did not have if you either had to have a vaccine or you had to get tested like all the fucking time, like every day or whatever it was, or every few days or every week, whatever it was, I'm like, this shit is just so ridiculous. Like, I am not taking this shit. And if I get fired as a result, that's like where I was. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. Fire me. So I'm from New York City. Thankfully, I moved out of New York City to a very rural area with a lot of open land and, just so much space that I can walk around with. So that was actually a very good thing for me. If I still lived in New York City, like during the peak of the lockdowns, I think my mental state would have been much, much, much worse than it actually was during that time. But I ended up coming back to New York City because my grandfather actually died right after my father died, which was just great timing there. And I did not have the vaccine, but that was around the time when they had vaccine requirements for pretty much everything. It was a citywide mandate. You couldn't go into any building without a vaccine. So I was just like, I felt being there, I felt like a second class citizen. Like I didn't have rights. I couldn't go anywhere without showing my papers. Like I'm like, this is ridiculous. And there were friends even like where I said, because I was at a family member's house. That's I was staying with that family member because of my grandfather dying. So we were all like the whole family was gathered in that one place, and I didn't go out because I knew I was going to be asked to show my vaccine. Um, and I just wasn't having any of that. But I like invite friends to come over to that house because that's the one place where you can be where they're not going to ask for your papers. And I have my friends who I haven't seen in so many years, like saying, "Oh yeah, like I don't think I'm going to come because you don't have the vaccine." Because they're asking me like, "Oh, is everyone in the fucking house vaccinated?" I'm like, "I don't fucking know, and I don't fucking care. Why should you care? If you have the vaccine, why are you so concerned? If you have the vaccine, you're convinced that it works so well. You know what I mean?" And I know this video is going to get me flagged. I already know it. It's one of those things where you can't say anything. And I'm not even saying that I'm completely right. I'm just saying this was my mindset during that time. Little disclaimer there. I don't know if that's actually going to make a difference. And I still don't know what's right or what's wrong as far as all that goes. But all I can say is that all the vaccine requirements have been pulled since then. And it doesn't seem like we're dying, a lot more than we already were before. And no one's really talking about COVID anymore. No one's talking about vaccines anymore. It's just something that people kind of forgot about and moved on. We've all moved on from that. So that kind of just tells me that this whole thing was blown way out of proportion. I am very grateful that the Supreme Court shot that shit down because I was ready to be on the unemployment line over this shit. But I remember that was this experience that stood out to me. I felt like I was in a George Orwell novel, like, being denied service like pretty much everywhere because you didn't have a vaccine. Like it's insane, absolutely insane. So once that whole thing started to change, and once we took off the masks and the vaccines weren't a conversation anymore, COVID wasn't a conversation anymore, I felt so much better being able to just be out in the open air, no mask, seeing people's faces, seeing people's smiles. It just, that alone improved so many things, when it comes to my overall mental health. So I'm glad that it's over. I I don't even know if we as a society will ever be at that place again where we'd be willing to just shut everything down. I think it's kind of like a lesson learned type thing. It had more of a negative effect in the long term than a positive because it just fucked people up so much. So many businesses ended up permanently closed, including one of my favorite restaurants ever, a few minutes from where I live, completely gone because COVID killed it, because it was locked down. I know there are a lot of places that try to do like the whole takeout thing. For some restaurants, it worked out. For a lot of them, though, it didn't because it's like, the restaurant that I'm thinking of, it was like a really upscale place. No one's going to do takeout for that, But it's a time that I don't look back at very fondly. I don't think anyone really does. But the timing just sucked because I was finally like starting to hang out with people in college because I transferred from a different school, and it was already towards the end of my run in college anyway, but I was actually like making a lot of friends like during the last like 2 weeks before the lockdowns. I'm like, oh, I mean, I was gonna lose them soon anyway because of graduation and shit. But yeah, let me know in the comments section, what are your experiences during COVID, like from 2020 to 2022, and how did it affect you? How did it affect you mentally, and how did it change you as a person, or did it at all? I want to know all of your experiences. I'm going to read every single one of them in the comment section down below. And then thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys next time.